So recently, one of my subscribers sent me an email and asked me a question. Aisha, what is the simple way or easiest way for me to differentiate between the product backlog and the sprint backlog on Jira? And at first, I was like, okay, I have a whole playlist on Jira, so you can see all of this on the Jira, right? But she stated that her company Jira is so different from what she's seen online. So she really would like to know better. So on today's video, I'm going to go over the simple way how you can tell, regardless of what company, what environment you are, what is the difference between the product backlog and the sprint backlog. Before we dig even further, welcome back to Aisha Tech. I'm very happy to have you join the platform. And if you're interested in mentorship, do not hesitate to email us at admin@aishascrumtech.com and like, subscribe, and thank you all for subscribing. And just for you to all know this, we all know that when doing Scrum, right, we already have a product backlog and a sprint backlog. And in this case, right now I have the backlog closed. I can reopen it so you can see this. This is the product backlog, and this is the sprint backlog. All of these are all sprints, by the way. We have currently 3 open sprint backlog, and we also have the product backlog. So we all know that the developers actually work from a sprint backlog. And just open the sprint backlog so you can see. So developers, for the most part, they will always be work within a sprint backlog. And the product owner are the owner and the master of the product backlog. So the product backlog, that's where everything comes in, right? So things that we get from new requirements or enhancement, anything you are working on, all the stories that have been created or tags or any placeholder story will be placed in the product backlog. And things that feedback we also got from sprint review or feedback we got from customers, anything that is the product owner is having conversation with the team and stakeholders, leadership, anyone else that we're actually building this for, we do all of that. All those tasks have been created. We usually will be putting it all in the product backlog, right? And the product owner, they are the master of that backlog. They look at the overall backlog, they order the product backlog, and they continue to reorder the product backlog and refine it so that it can be ready for us to pull and work on them in the sprints. So the biggest difference when you're looking at the product backlog from Jira point of view, right? Let's look at Jira point of view. The biggest difference for me, regardless of what company I work for, what environment I'm in, at the top of every product backlog, every single product backlog in Jira, you will always see create sprints. For me, this is like the biggest giveaway and the biggest clue where I can look at the board. I'm like, okay, this is different. And this is the real product backlog, because you can only create sprints from a product backlog, right? Because if you look up here at the sprint backlog, there is no icon that says create sprints. Instead, in this active sprint, it's telling me to complete the sprint, right? Because it's the current active sprint. But I know sometimes in your work, you might not see this icon based on who have privilege to start or end your sprints, right? But for the most part, you will see timeline for the sprint backlog, right? And the product backlog, you will see this icon of create sprints. And you will see all kind of issue in here, right? Sometimes the stories are ready, sometimes it's not ready. And through your discussion in backlog refinements, then you'll find yourself having those high-level discussion and getting your stories to ready. But for good agile team and an agile team that are working towards being proactive, keeping the cycle working really good, for the most part, they will always have stories that are the highest priority should be at the top of the product backlog. So that when we do go to sprint planning, the developers are able to know that, okay, this is the next important things we must work on. Then we can now pull those and move it to the sprint backlog. But for you all, it's very important for you to know that the product owner, they own this space, right? They can go up and down and move things sideways, everything in this space, right? And through discussion, collaboration, negotiation with them, we are able to come to an agreement to help determine what are we working on next, right? What are we not working on next? What is the goal? What is the feedback from the stakeholder? And where does the business have us? Connecting everything to our overall roadmap, our plan, and also our delivery, right? That's very important. So now that's the product backlog. Now let's talk about the sprint backlog, right? For the most part, for the sprint backlog, you will always see the sprint name. I know here I'm calling it sprint. This sometimes in your job, you might not be even called the sprint backlog sprint. And I think that's where a lot of you have been so confused because these people are not calling the sprint backlog sprints, right? Sometimes they just put the timeline and call it their own unique name, right? But in this space, I have sprints, right? Because I'm coaching and training new people that are going to be practicing in this space. So then for them to at least understand the difference, I try to make it this way. But sometimes in your job, you might not see this. But some clues that can help you is number one, in the sprint backlog, you will see the timeline, right? You will see the timeline, when does the sprint start and when does the sprint end? And another clue you might see also is sprint goal right here. See right here? This is the sprint goal that says to ensure the team stay focused and complete item committed to. So this is the sprint goal for this sprint, right? But sometimes too, based on based on how your company Jira is set up, you might not even see your sprint goal at the top of your sprint backlog. You might not see this. I know I've worked for some company where it's only the leads and agile coaches and RTEs are the ones starting and ending sprints. So because we all have this shared start and end sprint, different teams are unable to see the sprint goal at the top of the sprint backlog. Instead, we can get an overall one for the whole department, right? So that's another clue. You will always see the sprint goal on top, and at the side, you will see the number of stories. Like it gives you like a high level of the status, right? I know you also have that here too in the product backlog, where you can see all these different status too. Right here, you can tell you to what those statuses in here. Or sometimes too, stories that have already been spilled over are deemed less priority. Sometimes they can pull it back to the product backlog. But people are like, oh, why would you have an in-progress story in the product backlog? That means that that story was not deemed as important anymore, or is not of a high priority, and they will move it back to the product backlog. And when you do move it back, as long as you decided working on it, the status remain the same in the product backlog, right? So that's why maybe sometimes you may see it. But for the most part, a lot of tasks in the product backlog will always say to do or in backlog status, right? But for here in an active sprint, for the most part, as the sprint is getting close to the end, you might see 0 for the to do, meaning that we've already like basically started working on most of the story, which is exactly what we want, right? And we have the blue icon means in progress. So right now we have almost half of the story that are in progress. And we still have like a couple of days before the sprint end. That's something you look at and you call out as a Scrum Master as you are coaching and guiding your team. And then the next one is the done, right? How many stories have we completed so far in the sprint? And you're looking at all of this category at the end of your sprint, at the end of your daily Scrum. This is one thing that you can summarize and tell the team so they can know our current state. Or if you have a dashboard, you can also use the dashboard and go over this with the team. So this is very important. Other thing too you will see is the name of the assignee and the name of the people that are doing the work right here. Around here, these are the name of the people that are actually being assigned tasks in this sprint. And for almost 9 out of 10, you will always see this, for the most part, only in the sprint backlog, right? You will not see that in the product backlog, because in product backlog, the team is not working on anything yet, right? Those are stories that we plan to work on in the future, or something that we plan to refine and have discussion over. So for the most part, you will always see people that are assigned in the story. And that's important because you don't want story in your backlog where you have team members and they don't basically didn't take ownership of a task, right? At all time, if people are working on anything, we want them to assign themselves to the task. We want to be transparent at all time when you work with the team. And if you work with the team and you notice that they don't have their tasks on the board, and that's something you have to coach them as a Scrum Master, remind them and guide them. Because at all time, if we don't put it in the board, it just means like it did not exist, and you do not want that, right? So that's another thing. Another biggest clue too you will see in this in a sprint backlog before that. If this can be valuable to you, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate this. And if you're interested in mentorship, do not hesitate to email us at admin@aishascrumtech.com. So other biggest clue you can see definitely is also the estimation. Right here, you see the estimation. All these estimated story points, for the most part, you'll see all the stories that are estimated in an active sprint. But sometimes too, you might have a tracker ticket or a tag ticket that's put in the board that do not need estimation. And maybe if your company too, you do not estimate spike, then you might have those there, spike that might not estimate. I know some companies do and some people do not. And maybe if you have a bug story or in sprint defect, you might also have those in there that might not be estimated. But for the most part, a lot of those stories will be estimated because these numbers, these story points is counting how many of those stories are estimated, not the issue count, right? Because there's a difference between issue count and also the story points. So you see, we have 7 issues, that's the 7 issue counts. And this number we have here, these are all the estimation. So that's very, very important. So that's another biggest clue difference between that. And for the most part, so even in the product backlog and the sprint backlog, you always see stories that are linked to Epic, right? You see Epic? So we always have stories that are linked to Epic. Like for example, the ones that don't have Epic, which is not a good practice, you want story to be linked to every Epic, right? So you can connect it all the way to the future and how we plan to release and deliver. So you will also see this in the product backlog, and you also will see this in the sprint backlog. We see that in the product backlog, we still have all this Epic in here. And sometimes too, before story and meet the definition of ready, the team might have all this conversation and determine how we can link those stories to the Epic, right? So you will also see that. And at all time here, you can create an issue from a sprint backlog, and it's the same thing. You can also create an issue too at the bottom of the product backlog. You can also create an issue, right? And you can pull and move story up and down. But when you have an active sprint, you always have to communicate before you start pulling things or removing things in your sprints. And as you have spillover, it's something you have to discuss. You don't just pull things when the sprint is active. You wait until the sprint is closed before you do all of that. So that's the simple and easiest way to know the difference between a product backlog and a sprint backlog. And for the sprint backlog, you always, if you click the 3 dots, it will always tell you edit sprints. And if you look at the product backlog, you will not see that 3 dots. The 3 dots, we do not have that 3 dots in the product backlog. But the 3 dots to edit the sprint, if you click here, edit, you click the 3 dots, you hit edit, you're able to edit and adjust the sprint date and adjust the title, write the sprint goal and all of that. If you, the Scrum Master, have the privilege to do so, or you're in a company where you have the privilege to do so. But it's very, very important you understand the simple basic between a product backlog and a sprint backlog. Because if not, if you start pulling, you start assuming the product backlog or a sprint backlog, you can pull and remove and do anything, then the team might not have that discipline to know that, oh, what we are actually working on right now is what we are working on. And if things change or we have to adjust our scope, of course, we're going to have a conversation and discussion, and then we'll estimate and get that story to ready before we pull it to the sprint backlog. And before we end, it's actually very, very important that for you to say that you are working on a story, you have to ensure that the story meets your definition of ready, right? And some of you will be like, Aisha, what do you mean definition of ready? Or how do I come up with that? Your team have to come together and have a discussion based on the future you are working on, or based on the projects you are working on, based on the flow of work, or the people you are working with. You all will come up with the definition of ready you have before you pull story from the product backlog to the sprint backlog. Because you don't want to pull story that's not ready into your sprint backlog, and there's a high chance you're going to be blocked to the point that you cannot complete anything within the sprint. And you also, to coach the team, you have the mindset that things that we put in the sprint backlog, we should at least have the confidence, right, that we are able to complete that within a sprint. And of course, things will happen, right? Sometimes you plan for things and things might not go as planned, but that's okay. But all time we have the mindset that we are coming together, we are looking at our availability, we are having high-level discussion, we are breaking down story together, we are looking at the acceptance criteria, we are negotiating with the PO, and the PO at the end can either approve it or deny it based on the overall description of that particular story. But it's very, very important as a Scrum Master, before you start any sprint, you should always get your team's confidence. Like, okay, this is already planned for to work for in this sprint. So what is your confidence level? During sprint planning, if you look at my sprint planning video, you see that at the bottom, it will always tell you the workload, right? Right now is the active sprint, so it won't tell us with this one, but at the bottom, it will always tell you the workload. So with that, then you're able to ask the team before you start the sprint, oh, how confident are you all with this 7 issues that we've already picked? You're not just picking on one person or asking one person, but you're asking the overall team because you want to get this mindset around we are working together as a team and our goal is to work together to get things done together as a team. It doesn't matter if one person completes early and the other completes late. If we all did not complete, then we all did not meet the goal. For us to get credit that we actually complete the tasks, we all must work together and complete these tasks together. So that's why it's important for you to get the confidence both before you start the sprint. And as you continue to coach them and guide them and things that you're noticing throughout the sprints, as needed, you can call it out, or some of if it's not emergency, you can wait to retrospective and get the team to talk about it. If this has been valuable to you, follow Aisha Tech in all social media platforms. I'm going to be going on live on Fridays for 1 hour. So follow this channel so you don't miss any live. You can come in there and ask any question around Agile and Scrum. And if you're interested in mentorship, do not hesitate to email us at admin@aishascrumtech.com. Thank you for watching this video. In my next video, I'm going to show you all about the Jira Insight. I'm going to go over this Jira Insight and I'm going to talk about that. Thank you for watching. See you again in our next video.